So today I have Jessica Speer with me. She is an award-winning author of books for kids and teens, including BFF or NRF, which is Not Really Friends, A Girl's Guide to Happy Friendships, and Middle School Safety Goggles Advice. I love that name. But you are launching a new book this month called The Phone Book, which I think is so important to talk about the phone and social media. And that's stay safe, be smart, and make the world better with the powerful device in your hand. So, Jessica, thank you so much for coming on the Real Life Moms podcast.
Hey, thank you for having me, Lisa. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. This conversation is so important. As you know, season 5 of Real Life Moms has kind of revamped a little bit more into this self-help for moms and really encouraging moms to live that life that they desire. But I wanted to have you because I just think phones and social media bring up so many feelings in parenting and ourselves that I thought it was such an important conversation for us to have.
Yeah, it's even as adult women, I think we can all still experience, looking at feeds and comparing ourselves and, all that stuff. And, thinking about that in the life of a preteen, it's a lot, it's a lot for teens to be handling right now. Yeah. So that's why I wanted to put a book out there to really unpack some of this stuff that happens online because it's tricky. It's not easy to navigate, emotionally or socially.
No, and it's so funny. I wouldn't say I unfollowed. I was going to say unfriend. I didn't unfriend. I unfollowed somebody just because every time I look at their feed, I felt bad about myself. And it wasn't like they were posting anything wrong. It was just that I don't know. I got a little fear of missing out. I didn't like how I was feeling around it. That I told my daughter, I was like, yeah, I just unfollowed them because I just didn't feel good every time I looked at their feed. So
Yeah.
even as adults, we can have like these
Yes.
awful feelings.
And I love that you said that because there was actually a study done that talked with teens about this and saw the effect if they did change their feed. So this is something we can talk to our kids about. They saw, really positive changes to their mental well-being when they were actively curating their feeds. So if you notice, what is bringing you down, what is, putting you in these bad moods, that's one thing we can help our kids with. We need to be changing our feed because algorithms are sometimes not looking out for our best interest. So I love that you did that. And that is definitely something I talk to my kids about. And I mentioned in the book because it's a skill that we have to learn over time to notice while we're on our devices, how are we feeling? And we might need to shift things up if it starts to, go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. And I like to look a lot of positive quotes and positive things. I just love that positivity and manifestation. So I'm constantly searching that on purpose and like liking those things because I've heard, and you can tell me if this is true, I've heard that if you're searching certain types of things and scrolling through certain types of things, you'll get more of that in your feed. So I
Yeah.
want more positivity in my feed. So that's what I do.
That is 100% true. So how algorithms work is exactly like that. So they're noticing what we're scrolling on. They're even noticing what we're pausing and paying attention to. So if that's what you're pausing and paying attention to, they want to keep us on our screens. So they're going to send us more of that sort of content. And so where this gets tricky, with kids and teens is say they get into, a dark place. So they're watching content on disordered eating or they're watching content on self-harm. That's where algorithms can start to feed them more of that stuff and get them into even a darker place. Yeah, so let's talk about this more with our kids and our families. We need to change our feed and choosing those positive things, inspiring things, people who are making really positive changes in the world. That's what we all need to be watching and contributing to.
So, okay. So I didn't make that up. That's great. I'm glad I figured that out.
On your own. I love it.
Yeah. And so, what were you seeing before you wrote this book, the phone book? Like, what were some things that you were dealing with social media in your own personal life and family?
Yeah, well, I started this book actually during the pandemic. So at that point, I had a preteen and an early teen, and we were just navigating this whole screen thing, and we were all getting sucked into our screens because it was a pandemic. And I actually watched this documentary, which you might have heard of, called The Social Dilemma. I don't know if you've
Oh
seen it.
yeah. Not only have I seen it, but one of my daughter's friends is the girl in it, the little girl.
Oh, no
Not so
way.
little anymore. Yeah. Uh-huh.
No way. I love
Yeah.
so I that blew my mind because I didn't really understand kind of this behind the curtains way that technology works. And then as a mom, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to talk to my kids about this. And then I was like, as a writer and a social scientist, I thought, wow, all kids need to know about this. So that just really got me curious, and I just started researching all this stuff like we talked about, algorithms and advertising, and all these things that make us much more informed consumers of technology. So what I like to do is write books directly for kids, because kids are so smart, and I like to put the information right in their hands. So I just wrote this book really for preteens, because these days kids are getting phones earlier and earlier. So believe it or not, today 50% of 11-year-olds have a smartphone. Once we get to 12 and a half, 75% of 12 and a half-year-olds have a smartphone. And this is trending younger and younger every year. And as a parent, I know there's so many conversations we need to have once our kids have a connected digital device. I mean, so I just packed all those in there. So in addition to how technologies work, things like stranger danger and disinformation and digital drama and cyberbullying and FOMO and all those things that are really complex and about phones. I just wanted to share those in an age appropriate, fun, interesting way with kids, so they are better consumers and more informed consumers.
Yeah, I love how you write, because you do write for the kids, and you do research through the kids to
Yes.
actually figure out what you're writing about. So, yeah, I was going to say, have you found anything specific that you were surprised in your research when talking to teens or just kids in general?
What is interesting is I think, adults, we often have a love-hate, relationship with especially social media. So do teens. So we often think that they absolutely love it, but that's not really true. I mean, it is stressful. And so I found that, that teens are experiencing, digital stress because they have to keep up with all this stuff, so they have to stay engaged, or they don't seem like a good friend. And if they don't comment in a certain way, in a timely fashion, and that's just one example of the complexity of kids and teens online social lives. So maybe when they're starting out, it's all amazing and wonderful, but then it gets much more complex, as they hit the early teens and deeper into the teens. And I think it's tiring for kids. I was just as we were finishing up this last school year, I was sitting with a group of high school seniors, just we were having a chat about all this. And they were nostalgic for the days, when they didn't have a phone, and they would be out in the street, and they'd play kick the can and ghost in the graveyard and all those old games we used to play. They were nostalgic for that, and they felt bad for the generation younger than them that isn't going to experience that. And I thought that was so interesting. This newer generation doesn't even know anything different, but the ones that are the upper teens now, they kind of remember pre-pandemic life without phones. And yeah, they're very mixed about the impact of their lives. There's pluses, but there's a lot of tough stuff they don't love too.
Yeah, and I can see that. I mean, it's funny because for me, I have my phone. It's right here. See, phone. Okay. It's here right next to me. I do feel a little naked without it, I'll be honest, but I'm not tied to it. In fact, because of my job, I work with clients. I can't have the phone ringing while I'm physically working with somebody. So I don't answer my phone a lot, and I don't get back to text right away. I'm not like attached to it in that way. But what I noticed about my kids is that if someone doesn't text back or does not answer back, it's almost like an insult. It's like, oh my God, she's mad at me. Or, oh my God, like, what did I do wrong? I didn't realize that. I didn't realize like not answering is actually very hurtful for that group of teens.
Yes, it is. And that's where that pressure comes in. And it could be, oops, somebody forgot. But there's also, these little ways to be a little socially aggressive sometimes on some of these things. So they might not be responding on purpose because maybe they actually are mad. And so it's that ambiguity, it could be nothing, but it actually could be something. And that ambiguity is so hard on preteens and teens because they're wondering, because it actually really could be either one. Sometimes as parents we're like, oh, it's, yeah, I'm sure they just forgot, but maybe, or maybe there's actually something going on there. And they know that. They've seen this play out. So they know that.
And then they have things like, I think it's called Find Your Friend or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, where they literally can see, like, so they can say, all my friends are, I mean, I'm not doing that as an adult. Like, all my friends are hanging out, they're all hanging out. Why didn't I get texts? Am I not on the group chat? And I'm thinking, like, wow, that is so much to navigate. I mean, first of all, group chats, I mean, talk about any privacy, right? Like, God forbid you would want to have a one-on-one text or conversation. That's like taboo because then you're leaving out the group. Like, everybody has to know. And then seeing friends hang out when you weren't invited, it's just so much.
Yeah, it's complicated. So I feel like I feel a lot of empathy for teens today. I feel like, these years are never easy. Ours weren't that easy, but it's much more complicated now because of all those social dynamics. Yeah, the group chats, it's not easy to navigate that. People get kicked out of group chats, and sometimes it's warranted, sometimes it's not warranted. And what does all that mean for us? When the school day was over, but now it's really just beginning. Like the phones, they are in connection with each other sometimes through the night. And that's another factor is, I did find talking to teens that they're so tired. They're so tired because they are up checking their phones. So a lot of teens are up, well past midnight on a school night, so they're not even close to getting like the recommended 8 to 9 hours, for the teen years. And that's hard too for every other aspect of your life.
Yeah. And I'm going to raise my hand because my kids are on it. My daughter, for sure, is on it past definitely whatever you call bedtime in teenagers. I mean, I go to bed before they do, but yeah, for sure. And it's like this fear of missing out on something, or not answering and having
Yeah.
someone think they're mad, right?
Yeah.
So I think as a parent, this has been definitely, I kind of actually, I'm going to be honest, I kind of gave up on the whole social media stuff because it was just so much to navigate. I did all the, you can only use this during these times. When the sun goes down, you can watch TV. Like, I tried. And then I just got to the point where, like, okay, at what point do I just trust my kids, have conversations, and then figure it out together?
Yep.
Um, so I don't know if I'm the best parent, but there's a lot of guilt there because you don't know what the right answers are as a parent. You
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
how to keep them safe. Am I making a huge mistake by letting my kid have it all the time? What do you have to say to that?
Oh man, I think you're in the boat with a lot of parents because the phones are buzzing all night. So obviously, the vast majority of teenagers have their phones with them all night, even though the advice is make sure the phones are not in bedrooms. Phones are in bedrooms, and the kids are up very late. So this is I think for my kids, I'm such like I really talk a lot about sleep because I am such a firm believer in sleep. So in my house, I'm maybe a little more strict on trying to help them get adequate sleep because what we know from sleep studies is that the very last portion of sleep, those last 3 hours are the most important because that's when we're actually taking everything we learned and we're organizing it in a way that we can actually remember it. So for me, it's a little bit easier because some of my kids are so academically inclined that they're like, okay, school is important to me, this is important to me, so it helps my learning and my academic and career goals. But I know that argument would not work in a lot of families. So this is a tough one for a lot of families. And what I wish is that I wish they had more help because right now this is all on the shoulders of parents. Like there's no help. And what I also found in researching this book, there's a lot of organizations working on this, including the United States, government. So there's committees. In fact, there's one in the Senate Commerce Committee that is working on two bills that, after 5 years, these two bills are both dealing with kids and privacy and safety. They finally made it out of the committee, and there was really intense debate for almost 5 years. And I was watching these, as I was researching this book. So there is some movement here, because I think we can really, as a country, as a world, do better to protect our kids from a lot of this stuff online. So not only like just lack of sleep, but seeing inappropriate content, violent content at very young ages. Like, we can do a lot better. We can actually put in place some meaningful age verifications so kids don't have to see really inappropriate graphic content. We can protect their privacy a lot more. Like right now, there's no checks on tech companies, so they're gathering so much data, and teens are seeing on average 1,000 ads a day, and a lot of those ads are targeted based on their very own data. So that's tough. That's also another thing that teens are facing. So my hope is that we will start to put some other pieces in place so this all doesn't fall on the parents, because it is so hard to manage. Raising a teen is hard enough, and then you throw this on top. It's a no-win situation right now for parents.
Yeah, that seems like such a huge feat, because I wonder, like, how do they actually regulate that stuff? I mean, kids lie about their age all the time online so that they can get an app. There's nothing to say that they're not. They just changed their date of birth.
Yeah. Well, there are ways, like, there are ways to verify. It might require a driver's license. It might require, so there are ways to, I know we have the technology to do this. Right now, it's a lot of how best to do it. I get also a lot of pushback from lobbying groups, but it's more, what is the right age and how do we do this? But the technology is there. Like, we can do this, and I don't even know if we want to go down the porn path, but the average age that kids stumble upon pornography is 11. That's not healthy either. So that, and it's often by accident, maybe some sort of search, because it's so readily available. But this is not the same as, us finding a Playboy magazine or something. This is very violent, graphic, non-consent content that young brains are seeing, and that's so unhealthy. So I'm like, we can do better. We have to do better. We really have to do better to protect kids. And there's other countries that are doing much better. In fact, one of the pieces I have in the book is like other laws in other countries. It's much more strict. Like in a lot of Asian countries, or countries in Asia, there are time limits, and parents can be fined if kids go beyond these time limits. And, we wouldn't do that in this country. This country just doesn't operate that way. But it's interesting to see how other countries in the world are trying to navigate this too.
And what do you find is the most concerning around safety that kids are dealing with?
I feel like it a lot, yeah, because we worry about stranger danger, and we worry about cyberbullying, and both of those are pretty scary. And cyberbullying actually is fairly common. So I still feel like maybe what's the most harmful is content. When I was watching some of these, Senate testimonies, it was parents of kids that died during TikTok challenges and things like that. So the tech industry is one of the only industries in our country that's pretty unregulated. There is an old law, it's Section 230, that protects tech companies from any liability from any content posted on their site. So therefore, like, really harmful content to kids, those companies have no liability. And so those stories are tragic to me. So believe it or not, I feel like harmful content, because it's so rampant out there and it's so accessible to our kids, and a lot of it is because of this old law on the books, that's never been updated, and that's under discussion. It's hard to do this in a country that has freedom of speech, but how can we have freedom of speech but also really not have a bunch of really harmful content out there that is actually taking the lives of kids?
I know, that is so sad. I mean, I remember having the conversation with my kids saying, okay, there's a challenge going on. Like, don't swallow the laundry detergent. Like,
Yes.
What?
Mm-hmm.
What is?
Yes.
That's terrible.
I
Some of these
know.
challenges are terrible.
And there's so many of them. It's just it's amazing. There's one after the other. This one that they make themselves pass out, like the
Oh,
breath holding or the choking
yes.
thing. And it's just, and they're young minds, and they're off in their room, so nobody knows actually what they're up to. So yeah, tragic. Sorry to take us down such a
Okay,
sad
yeah.
path, but I mean, this is, yeah, that I'm like, we can do better.
We can do better. We
We
can
can
do
do
better. I
better.
agree.
Yeah. And if I feel like if we could somehow change that section 230 so that companies, for stuff like that, especially when it's taking kids' lives, there's no reason there's not liability there for every other industry. Like if that was a toy, an actual physical toy, that would be pulled from the shelves immediately. So we're still getting there. I sometimes make the correlation, like, so the cars were invented in the 1800s, and it took till almost 100 years later to get seatbelts. So I feel like we're just now trying to figure out the seatbelts, for digital devices and social media for kids.
Although I don't want to be there for all the accidents. So yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
for sure. Hopefully it won't take 100 years. There's a lot of groups actively working on this. It's really hard to find consensus and move things forward.
Yeah. So I know in your book you talk a little bit about the blueprint, like the blueprint that actually follows us around, our reputation on social media. Can you talk a little bit more about that and kids being on devices? What do they really need to look out for putting out there that could affect them later on in life?
Yeah. And so, I call it digital footprint, or your digital reputation. And this is, again, it's a hard concept if you're 10 or 11 years old to think of what you're putting out there actually might matter in the future. So this is an ongoing conversation that we can have with our kids, and they get really tired of hearing it, because they see all sorts of stuff out there. So obviously other kids are not complying with this, but just reminding them in as gentle way we can that colleges and employers actually do look up students online before they hire them or maybe accept them into their college. So it's important to think about, who are we and how do we want to present our public persona, because it is like a footprint. Unlike a footprint at the beach, it doesn't wash away. It's out there, and kids know better than any of us that you can screenshot anything in a second. So screenshot, it's there. And so even if it's on Snapchat where it might disappear, somebody can screenshot that quickly before it disappears. So just reminding kids, and they get really tired of our constant reminders, but trying to just help them keep thinking about this. And they will mess up, everybody messes up, and we can help them try to remove things, but sometimes it's hard to really clean up something that's been shared and then recorded and shared widely by other parties. So just making sure they understand that as they go. And it especially becomes important in high school, when they are starting to apply for colleges and think about their future career.
I mean, it's so scary because exactly, they're trying things, they're doing things, and to have that out there, that one little mistake, that one little thing, just that can just put a mark on their reputation, or even, yeah, like you said, applying for colleges or a job. That's really scary.
And when I was looking into this, what I did find is, in most cases, it works out really positive for the applicant, apply. So the colleges are actually also, they're finding really positive stuff too. But
Yeah,
there
that's true.
have been well-known cases where they have actually removed acceptance letters because of things they found with students online. But for the most part, it's actually an opportunity for them to really showcase who they are and what they love to do. So they can use that to their advantage too.
Okay, which brings me, let's talk about some positive aspects of
Yes.
social media. I'm a positive person. I
Yes.
know they're out there. So what is the most positive thing for ourselves or for our kids to be being online?
I think for a lot of kids, it's a way to really connect with others, especially kids from some communities they might not find in their own school or even their own community. So it is helping a lot of kids that might not be finding their people in high school, find those people. So that is a real positive in many ways. It's a great way for kids to express themselves and become civically engaged. And I love the stories of when these teens actually really collaborate on something and it goes viral, and it's this huge movement that's coming right out of social media. So they're not 18 yet, they can't vote. However, it has given teens a voice in many ways because they actually come together and talk, and this powerful voice of teens comes through social media. So that's really cool to me. Some social activism, some connection. So yes, there is definitely positives, and kids really can start to showcase who they are, maybe sharing their artwork or sharing their music. So there is certainly a lot of positives out there, and I include some stories in the book about that too, just some kids that are doing some amazing things online. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be huge, some kids that are just in really small ways, making their communities better. Maybe just really making sure to give shout outs to people that have done something cool but maybe got overlooked, or just being digital citizens that are lifting others up by what they're putting out there. So there's a lot of opportunities for kids to really help others too.
Yeah, I love that. And I think my daughter showed me this beautiful video of like someone like playing the violin, a song, like a popular song, and then they mixed it with somebody else, mixed it with them singing to it, and then someone mixed both of those. So it almost like added on, and it became this like nobody knew each other. This beautiful musical thing that was gorgeous and just so collaborative, a bunch of people who didn't even know each other. So I
Yeah.
agree. It can be really, really big, really powerful. So using it in the right way, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. And it's what I talk about in the book is, use this as a force for good. We all have this really powerful tool in our hand that, we get to choose how to use it. So just those making a point every day is like, how can I use this tool that's in my hand as a way to make the world a little bit better?
So tell us about your book and where we can find it.
It's called The Phone Book. Stay safe, be smart, and make the world better with the powerful device in your hand. And it is available anywhere books are sold. So Target and Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but you can also probably order it from your local bookseller, which I always love to try to bring some business to our local booksellers. Yeah, so it's available now, and I wrote it again for more of a preteen, early teen audience, for kids that are just really, getting more involved in this space. And it's filled with stories and activities and pictures and those. I needed to make it fun because, let's face it, I'm competing with phones. So this had to be a fun book.
Totally, totally. You have to make it fun if you're competing with books. But just because it's called the phone book, they might actually want to read that.
Yeah, yes.
So that's great. So tell me, what do you really want parents to hear about social media and phones and kids?
I think everybody's journey is so different. So for us, we can just really take note of who our child or teen is. What are their strengths and what are their vulnerabilities, and just keeping that in mind as they enter their social lives online. So if we happen to know that maybe our teen girl does have some struggles with body image, we might want to talk to her, like what we talked about earlier, changing her feed, noticing when she's getting in this space. So there are positives and there's negatives to everything, and every kid has strengths and weaknesses, and they're all coming at this with their own experience. So let's just stay curious, and try to stay out of judgment and try to really understand how they're using this tool, because it's a huge window into their lives. If we can stay curious and ask them open-ended questions like, hey, what do you love about that app? Or gosh, that seems tricky navigating that group chat. How does that work? So just coming at this with a really open mind, with curiosity, we will get to know this whole experience to them, and probably be a better support for them.
And I'm just thinking, like, listening to all of that, teens, they're not necessarily coming to us with lots of things at this point. They don't necessarily open up so much, but it's almost like the social media can open up a lot of conversations with
Mm-hmm.
your teen. And that might be one really good and powerful thing. So, like you said, having these open ended conversations and questions but it really can spark a lot of amazing conversations.
Yeah, understand their world. And it's a different world than the one we grew up in.
Totally different, but we're all navigating it together. And I think sometimes our teens are teaching us about it most of
Yes,
the time.
100%. I feel like they are our teachers here.
Well, thank you for, first of all the great work you do. I mean, these books that you write, I have them all on my website. So if you go to Books by Our Guests, you can totally just see them all. But they're just geared towards teens in a way they understand. And that's so amazing. I'm so glad that you are a resource for them.
Well, thanks, Lisa. And thank you for having me. It was really fun to chat with you again.